Hello and welcome to Channel's Book Club. I'm Olakunle Kasumo. It's the week for our children, so much of today is dedicated to them. Let's get started with our favorite children readers. Enjoy this.
That moment, Doug, the biggest pixie and wise one of the pixie herd, said, "Everyone," and he went forward and picked up the wand and handed it to the queen. She was angry with Sherfa and Demini. And right there and then, before going ahead to bless the Pisky land, cast a spell on them, spell of cast away. Cast away these two. Let them go until good they have done to come home, she said. So when Sherfa and Demi, tumbling down and down away from the pixie land and into another part of Mama Chacha's garden. This part of the garden was dark and filled with thick underground that looked scary. Demni held on to Shelfa, and they both scared. They shouldn't have played a trick on the queen, but it was too late to change that. How would they ever get back home? They wondered, but that thought soon flew out of their mind as they were running and screaming in fright. From the underground came several glows of lightning looking like monsters' eyes. They were fire glows, but Sherfa and Demni didn't know this. They ran screaming as the light seemed to be chasing them. They ran and screamed harder, for the lights were advancing on them. Soon they were tired and there seemed to be nowhere to run again. And so they heard each other screaming with their eyes closed as lights caught up on them. If they could come out of this alive, if there was monster could eat them, they would never play a trick on anyone again.
Sadly, I had a bad cold. I was admitted to the hospital for 5 days and later discharged with the advice that I continued my treatment at home religiously. Grandma volunteered cheerfully to stay over when my parents were busy at work. I had no concerns with Grandma's kind gesture, but my major predicament was a sewing machine coming with her. In my mind, I was hoping I didn't have to learn any life principles or wise saying because I wasn't done with the first. "Sandra dear, you'll be fine," she said. "When I was your age, my aunt made me a coat when the weather was terrible like this. She said it was our family tradition to hand over warm clothing from one generation to the next. Warmer to her meant a spirit of love, a bond the family shared. I still believe in this folklore and I can give you my coat if you want." She paused, then asked, "Do you want it?" I got up from a sleeping posture and reclined on my bed. "That was ages ago. Times have changed," I said. "Yes, trends fade, but there are traditions that are too good to erase as culture changes," she replied. After a short while, she offered, "Never mind, I will make you a trendy woolly dress instead." She walked away as she sang Stevie Wonder's Fingertips. Finally, I had time to rest, so I reduced the TV volume, slipped under my duvet for a quick nap. But just before I did, I heard footsteps coming towards my room. "You don't need to bother about your measurements. I'll change the one I have by a few inches so that the dress fits perfectly,"
Thank you,
Grandma said.
Thank you.
I thought as I closed my eyes, "Breakfast is ready," Dad called out. It was freezing Saturday morning. The temperature plunged further into negative digits. The coldest that month in Seattle, Washington. I felt better by miles, yet I had to wrap up in many layers. I got up and went for breakfast, but we kept the house super warm. "Where is Grandma?" asked Dad. Dad asked. "I think she'll still be in bed," I replied. We had a nice meal. However, it was strange for Grandma not to be part of it, considering her strong emphasis on how important breakfast was. She never missed it.
There is always a motivation for writing a book. This is something we often try to find out from our many guest authors. Here are answers from a few of them.
Actually, the book I really wanted to write is the one I have just completed, which is it's called a Brief Political History of the Nigerian Army. But I'd written the prologue to Best Served Cold about 5 years ago, and I didn't think that I would be able to do justice to the political history until I completed the novel. And so, although I'd written the prologue about 5 years ago, I actually got involved in starting to write the novel when I semi-retired in March of last year, and that gave me a little bit more time. And so I think I wrote it in about 6 months, between March and November. The plot had always been in my head, it was just kind of fleshing it out. And that's why I started with the fiction. And so that's been done, and I've now moved on to the political history, which, as I say, is the one that I've always wanted to write. And I'm glad to say I've just completed.
I wrote this book out of many years of experience in the US. It's not just telling my story, it tells a lot of stories concerning a lot of Africans who, according to this book, have had a lot of tragic comedies while staying abroad. The battle for survival. At the end of the day, many survived, many couldn't really survive it. Like, I have many personal friends who have died in the struggle. As a Nigerian, I know that when you travel abroad, there are lots and lots of expectations from people back home. You know, you really have to do a lot of menial jobs to survive, not just for yourself, but you see yourself living from paycheck to paycheck on how to take care of people back home who don't really know what you do. All they care is send money for this, send money for this, and send money for that. And if you don't want to fail them, you just have to work extra hard, deprive yourself of so many opportunities of life just to meet their own expectation. The moment you start living for yourself, that is the end of their own dream.
I've worked a lot with adults, and I find that children receive information a lot better than adults. We have a very good opportunity to pass information on to children, whereby that information can change the way that they actually behave. You know, so I've released a lot of material for adults, and I found that in the 7 books I've written, there is that important opportunity to be able to pass that same information to children. But at the same time, rather than the way it happens with adults, where the adults still have the option of continuing existing behavior, with children, it actually usually transforms their behavior and you see positive impact.
The Chronicle Foretold is a book I wrote over a period of time as columns written every Monday in The Nation. During the 4-year span of Jonathan as a president, but there's also an overspill. Some of it spilled over to the afterglow of the Jonathan time. So there are some articles here that cover things that happened outside, like the articles I wrote about the Almajiri problems with El-Rufai, or Ambodi's early months to grapple with the problem of governance and how he handled it and stuff like that, and the problem with the Senate with Saraki's Senate presidential hiccups.
Actually, I did start out to write a book to encourage other motorcyclists and to share in your experiences. We generally have what we call ride diaries. So when I go on a ride, there are quite a number of us that do that. You go on a ride and you pen your experiences. So other riders who are thinking of doing similar things can go through your experience and be encouraged to do that. So that's how the book started. Well, it's not uncommon to find diaries amongst bikers because you want to share your experiences. It's very different for everyone, you know. And that was how it started. I kept the diary. You know, every night I would pen my feelings, my experiences, you know. Using my phone, I was typing on the phone. It was amazing. Somewhere in Dakhla, in Morocco, I pressed the wrong button and I lost everything from day 1 to Dakhla. I think it was maybe day 5 or day 6. So I had to rewrite that from memory and then continued on now a bit more careful with the buttons I press. Yeah, but that's how it started. It was the diary. Friends read the diary and said, you can do something with this. And, you know, eventually we have the book.
Oftentimes when writers tell you the stories behind their books, you get inspired to start your own writing. But some of the stories of great writers don't just pour you on to writing, but actually encourage you never to quit on anything in life. Here are the stories of 2 immensely successful novelists. One of the greatest novelists of all time is Stephen King. He specializes in horror, supernatural fiction, suspense, science fiction, and fantasy. He has published 54 novels, and his books have sold more than 350 million copies. His first published book, the one that gave him breakout success, is titled Carrie, and it has an interesting story behind it. King was stuck on drugs and alcohol. He was living in a trailer with his wife, and he was taking enough drugs to kill himself. In that bad state, he managed to scribble out a novel, but in a drunken stupor, he threw it in the trash can. As his life went from bad to worse, his wife found a novel in the trash can, took it out, read it, and convinced King to submit it to a publisher. He did so, and that novel, titled Carrie, changed his life and turned him into a superstar storyteller. Another great modern novelist is Lee Child. Lee Child is the author of the mega successful Jack Reacher series. The debut novel in that series is titled Killing Floor, and it is the one that announced Lee Child to the world. The story behind it is that at age 40, Lee Child lost his job as a television producer. Unsure about what to do with the rest of his life and needing some income, he decided to write a book. The book he eventually created was titled Killing Floor, and it went on to become an international bestseller. Today, Lee Child is an inspiration to all struggling writers and midlife crisis survivors.
Abeokuta, where the hilarious Harry genially guided the erring feet of the new caller, and heaven-high hills tell of their mighty Molder's wondrous ways, where rustic rafters a steady roof hold for quaint dwellings assured, and the hunter's hound treasured as the blacksmith his ewery at the smithy, where the legendary Lishabi sat in conclave with fate, and both in mutual accord chorused the final Baawa to the Egba Pathfinder's dance of leave taking. Where now is the chastity of the maidenhead, once hidden, untainted, under the rocks of innocence?
That poem on Abeokuta, the capital of Ogun State, southwest of Nigeria, was written by Olawale Obadeyi in 1987 and published in this book titled Abeokuta Beyond the Rocks, which captures many of the key sites, monuments, and stories of the historically significant city. Abeokuta Beyond the Rocks was written by Hakim Adenekon as a first in a series titled The Reawaken Nigeria Project. Adenekon is an alumnus of Cranfield University, United Kingdom, University of Navarra, Barcelona, the Ogun State Polytechnic, and the Lagos Business School. With this book, Hakim might have just announced himself as an advocate of preserving Nigerian stories. So, what inspired him?
I grew up in this town in Abeokuta, and I did all my studies here before I went abroad and all that. It was when I got abroad, sometime 2009, probably in Washington, and I laid my hands on a book about Washington State. And Washington State to New York is about 7 hours by air. So while I was aboard Continental Airline, going back to New York, within 7 hours, I went through the book and I realized that, look, somebody must have sat down and documented that state and that city, Washington, Seattle. Then something now hit me that, look, I am from Abeokuta, I'm a son of Abeokuta, and I'm from Nigeria. Abeokuta has so many firsts. It's a town of so many firsts. We don't keep record in Africa. Most importantly in Nigeria. I zero down to Nigeria, we don't keep record. So it baffles me each time that people travel, some of our leaders, they leave the shore of Nigeria, they go abroad. What do they bring back? What's their take? I mean, somebody or some people must have built those institutions. And what we just do is that we go on shopping spree. And I said that, look, there are so many ways we can document our history. So the only way I feel for now is that, okay, in a book format, they said Nigeria don't read books. Okay, why can't we use, think global and act local? I saw a book, internationally done, masterpiece about Washington. So what now says that we can't do that about Abeokuta, or about Nigeria? We have tourism development organizations in Nigeria, companies and institutions. So many states have their own Ministry of Tourism. But they are trying, but they are not doing as much as they are supposed to do.
Still in the spirit of celebrating children, one of the brightest young minds we have had with us here on Channel's Book Club is our next guest, whom we'll allow to introduce herself and her book to you. Enjoy this.
Hello, my name is Munachi Mbono. I'm 12 years old. I go to Atlantic Hall. I am the author of Father's Will, Children, the Child of Destiny, and Concealed. Father's Will was inspired by my stay at Echo Hotel and the different books about detectives I've read. I'm going to be reading chapter 1 of this book. Whoosh, I said as I jumped out of bed, excited and filled with joy. The long-awaited date is finally here. Today, I graduate as a detective from Richwood University, Florida. My plans are finally playing out like a well-written movie script. I've always wanted to fulfill my father's dreams, which was for me to join the police force and solve crimes. After all, my dad was the commissioner of police before he passed away. I remember my call to bar dinner with my parents and paternal grandma. My father already bought a police academy form for me to fill. I beg, please let my granddaughter look for a husband to marry so that I can see my great-grandchildren before I join my ancestors. Mama, our great country Nigeria needs young, smart and hardworking women like Izine who will carry out duties with all diligence. It's not about the money, but about service to humanity. I also need someone who will carry on my legacy. I will be forever happy if my only daughter becomes a police officer. Let Nigerians know that greatness lives in our family. My name is already on the Nigerian Police Wall of Honor. Let Ezine's name join mine someday. I watched my mom smile with so much pride. My grandma slapped her thigh excitedly and shouted, "Richard Okoye, the true son of his father." My dad continued speaking. Ever since I became the Commissioner of Police in Lagos State, the crime rate reduced by 60%, and I want Ezinne to pick up from where I stopped and even do better. My father said, smiling at my mother, who glanced and then smiled at me. The moment was when I realized that my father had planned out what he wanted me to be. I have fixed feelings remembering that event. I would do anything to my dad witnessed my graduation from Florida Criminal Justice School at Richwood University. On the other hand, I was happy to finally achieve my father's dream. My mom couldn't make it for my graduation because she forgot to check the expiry date of her American visa. She waited until the morning she was supposed to leave for Florida, which was the day before my graduation. Looking at her passport, she realized that she had mixed up the dates and that her visa had expired. It was too late for her to send it in for renewal. My mom felt so bad and cried. Looking at the time, I quickly went to wash up and eat breakfast. I put on a tailored black suit from Zazie Fashion, Lagos, with a brilliant white shirt. When it was my turn to give a speech on behalf of the international students, I stood up confidently and went towards the lectern. I gave a warm smile and cracked a popular joke. Naija no dey carry last, which got everyone laughing so hard because they know I'm a very proud Nigerian and a strong advocate of a new Nigeria. My speech got me a standing ovation. I ended by saying, I believe in Africa and I believe in a new Nigeria where the rate of crime will be reduced to the barest minimum and our talents will be more celebrated. A new Nigeria where international news media will no longer show hungry-looking and malnourished citizens, but instead showcase our rich and beautiful culture, modern skyscapes, beautiful road network, ICT wizards, and the multi-talented youth who will contribute not just to Nigerian economic growth, but to that of the world at large. After the ceremony, that seemed to go on forever. My friends and I went for dinner at a restaurant to celebrate our graduation. We had the reserved table beforehand, and so we all sat down laughing and telling jokes about our memories from school. This is my favorite chapter because of her speech of when she says she believes in a new Africa and a new Nigeria. I really want people outside Nigeria and abroad to change the perspective of how they see Nigeria.
I hope you have had a good time with us today. As always, we'll be delighted to get your feedback through any of our social media platforms displayed on your screen. I'm Olakunle Kasumo. Remember, one great book can change your life. Bye-bye.